Hello and welcome to the MPFT Podcast. On this episode, we're joined by Esme, a service user of our eating disorders service, and Lee, a peer support worker within the service. Esme has an amazing story of strength and recovery from anorexia, and she's shared her journey and discusses how MPFT has supported her recovery.
Hi Esme, really happy that you're here today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you start a bit by telling us a bit about your journey and where it's brought you so far?
It's hard to say when you first kind of got anorexia, because I think so much of it has roots in things that begin kind of when you first start growing up. But I think I first learned how to lose weight, if we're going to kind of phrase it like that, during lockdown, kind of 2020. I was on my gap year, went back home, and I guess obviously lockdown brings a bit of a kind of tricky situation in terms of, like, we've all experienced in different ways. You're at home with your family, and I think for me, my family's always can be quite a tricky thing. As much as I adore them and they're an incredible support network, I have 4 sisters and my mother, who I idolise, all of them. They're all blondes and beautiful, and I think I always somehow felt slightly isolated in that sense of just idolising them to the point of putting them on a pedestal. And so when we were all kind of together as a family, it meant that I think those feelings of being isolated were kind of made more extreme, and those kind of things that we say so often, maybe either as women or just society, in terms of the kind of thin is better, or, you know, you've got to be beautiful, you've got to be thin, you've got to, you know, however. I think those just all got heightened, and so that's when I first decided I'm going to try and lose weight. And when I first felt like I kind of unlocked that ability, it was euphoric, and I figured out I could just keep going, and then went to university. Obviously the independence of that and the fact that it was university during COVID definitely meant that went to an extreme. And so then cut about a year or so later, second year of university, where it all just lost a bit of control. And I kind of found myself realising, oh wait, this is an issue, but not so much as it was this is an issue, I'm going to sort it out. Just more of I'm in a really deep, dark hole and I don't know how to get out, but I just know that I want to stop everything around me because everything's too much, and I was just at a weight where I couldn't sustain any kind of work abilities. I mean, I'm someone that literally prides myself on being obsessed with my work and fascinated in everything and obsessed with kind of being out. I'm a kind of extrovert by nature, but it just turned me into a complete introvert, but also just not interested in anything. So I realised that everything was going wrong, but I also had no intention of changing it. But it did obviously then push to the point where I was like, I need to say I've got something wrong. So I did obviously then decide, okay, I need to accept I have anorexia, which was a very hard thing to try and say to yourself when you think that you're not thin, if you know what I mean.
How long, looking at your journey now, sort of like, it sounds like you were trying to get almost fit in with your family members, so it was almost like a sense of control, and then somewhere along the journey it maybe started controlling you a bit. You've mentioned about obviously the university, the second year in particular being that pivotal moment where you were sort of thinking, oh, maybe something's getting a bit out of hand. From that point on, when did you seek support then, and how did you go about seeking support?
Well, I mean, it was quite interesting actually the way I kind of ended up seeking support, because so during my second semester of my second year, so that was at the time, that was when I dropped out, or at least took a year off. So I contacted the GP in Scotland. So I was at the University of St Andrews, and contacted the GP, and it was a really quite horrific moment, because I rang them and I said it was the first time I'd ever said out loud, because obviously when you have anorexia, you have imposter syndrome completely. You do not think that you would never, even if you slightly think, oh, I'm quite thin, this is really great, you would never say it out loud. No. So to then say I thought I was anorexic was just completely against everything that I felt could be possible. So I rang this GP and I said, I don't know what to do. I think I have anorexia. And she said to me, just kind of point blank, she was like, well, what do you weigh? And so I told her my weight. She didn't ask my height, which always really confuses me. And she just told me, you're too big to be anorexic. Why didn't you go to student services? And I'm not saying that because I'm pointing blame at anyone. I think a lot of different, depending on where you are in the kind of nation, different GPs get a different amount of training with kind of eating disorders. So you do have a lot of GPs that don't understand it in the same way. And that's obviously an issue there. But I think why I think it's important is obviously then that made me go, oh God, I need to lose way more weight. Like, I can't believe I just admitted that I was too thin and then someone told me I was too big. I mean, it was my worst nightmare come true. So I just lost a load more weight, pretended it wasn't kind of something that was an issue, and then went back home for the weekend. And then again accepted from more of a push from my parents to go back to the GP. And this time, I guess obviously my GP kind of being maybe the fact that just the proximity to, St. George's, just the luck of the situation, they referred me to St. George's. And I think that's was obviously incredible, but also a sign that I think that there is no kind of medical way of defining if you're anorexic or not. You don't need a weight to say, I was just as ill. I was ill then, and I was ill when I went to Scotland, and I was ill when I was checking it in England. It's so hard, but I think just if someone says no, keep banging on the doors. I think keep going, keep pushing for help, which I think is really important. But yeah, I think it was then very lucky because we had St. George's so close, and it was interesting because they put me on a waiting list to go to St. George's, and there was a cancellation, and I got to go a lot faster than I should have gone, which was obviously very lucky for me. And then I was in St. George's, and from then on it was weekly checkups. I was an outpatient and waiting for therapy. And yeah.
The checkups, is that like the monitoring, like physical health monitoring?
Yeah, we did all the kind of, I remember it was just, in my head, all of this, when I look back at it, it's a very kind of light-hearted, kind of comical way of seeing everything, because I think you have a very serious defense mechanism around you when you're anorexic, that you can't actually take in anything that's going on. You can't really understand the depth of the situation. I remember sitting in St. George's in the kind of obs room where they check, I don't know if I'll be using the wrong language here, I know nothing about medicine, but they did my heart rate, and they did it 6 times. They were like, oh, the machine's broken, it's reading your heart rate at 39 BPM, or however you say it. And I was like, oh God, okay. Anyway, they come back, so it's not broken, it just, your heart's really not well. And we were like, okay. And that got me kind of immediately seen by someone else. And I think in my head, I was just like, this is so cool. I'm really good at being anorexic. Like, hospital, I think, immediately unlocked a new way of being anorexic, which is why it's so hard to actually treat it, because the more my blood results were bad, the more my heart rate was kind of deteriorating. It wasn't just like, before it was just a number on a scale. Now it was like blood results and heart, they couldn't take my bloods today. I was, that's so good. And I think, these are the really tricky things to deal with, because how do you treat someone that wants to be ill and enjoys finding out that they're ill? But so yeah, it's an up and down process. Amazing that I got into St. George's so quickly, but tricky because that invited a whole new level of the disease.
And I think that's the thing with anorexia, and there's so many levels to it. It's not, I think the misconception is that anorexia is about weight and purely focused on that food's the enemy, and actually there's so many different layers to it. And when you unlock these different layers, like, you'll go from one thing, like one focus on weight, to then you focus on your bloods, and the fact you can't get bloods, and obviously the fact that your heart rate was beating 39 beats per minute, did you say? Yeah, so obviously, when you go to sleep, that halves as well. So you can imagine what that would be when you're asleep as well. Hence why there is the panic almost around it all. I guess obviously that's the physical health side of the monitoring that St. George's provide. Going on to the therapy side, how important do you think therapy is in treating anorexia? or any eating disorder?
I mean, it's a very important, it's an essential part of the treatment. It's not the only part of the treatment. I can't say that therapy is a thing, the treatment in itself. I think therapy's part of the network that St. George's provides as the treatment. So I think it was a year later that I got onto therapy, and it was actually interesting because it was amazing because I had this incredible nurse who was doing my weekly checkups, and then there wasn't anyone to do mantra for me, so she ended up being trained for mantra to treat me. So I was her first patient, which was amazing. It created a really nice kind of equality, and she knew me so well, so it made me feel really comfortable. So I think there is that side of like having a really good relationship with your therapist, which can be very tricky. And therapy is so important because it gets dialogue going, it gets your voice back, it allows you to kind of just talk about things and just really unpack how you're feeling, and just the process of, writing letters to yourself in the future, or making mind maps about your personality, and little things like that make such a difference. But it has to be matched, and it really complicates me when I try and figure out, because a lot of people ask, how did you do it? What's the secret? And it's so hard because you can't do therapy unless you're eating, because your mind won't be able to accept what you're learning in therapy if you're not taking in the nutritional needs that you have to take in for your mind to work, however the science is. Again, I don't know. But then also you can't start eating without the dialogue that you have within therapy. But on top of all of that, on top of eating and therapy, you then have the fact that you need to have experience on the outside as well. You need to have the support. I was very lucky with my support network. I know I've kind of said, my family, I idolize them and I wanted to be a part of them, but they are the most we are an incredible unit, and it was incredible to have them. I was very lucky that I could go back home and just be there with my parents and with my sisters. But also you need to be out in the world living what you're learning, which can be very tricky. I was very lucky that I was never made an inpatient, and I don't have the experience to comment on treatment as an inpatient, because I think what was so important is that there was a mixture. It wasn't a linear process 100%, but it was amazing because I had the dialogue and I had the voice that was slowly coming out, which was my voice as opposed to anorexia. And then I had that slowly helping me eat more and more and slowly gain weight, which was a very hard thing to get over. But then I was able to actually experience the benefits of what I was achieving, because I was out in the world, and I could suddenly, yes, it was really hard to accept that I was gaining weight, and that really sucked for a long time, and it meant that I went up and down and up and down. But just one trip with my friends to the pub that I got, that was so fun and so lovely, just made me go, oh wait, that's so great actually, that because I ate supper that day I could go to, I don't know, it's so complicated. But then it meant that I went back to therapy, and suddenly I told my therapist, oh my god, I went to the pub, it was so fun. And then it gave more motivation. So it's a complex kind of process of therapy, eating, support, experience out in the world, and all of that just kind of going together, throwing it all, I don't know, and then just allowing you to just experience life as something that's really fun. And I think if you don't have the opportunity or don't push yourself to have fun and have and enjoy life while you're doing therapy, you're gonna miss what it's for. I don't know, it's so hard to articulate and to kind of get out, because therapy's so complicated. I cannot say how it worked. Sometimes I'm like, did it work? Was it that? But then I wouldn't know where I would be without it. It's so strange, but it's amazing at the same time.
I think that's the thing with therapy, until like sometimes in the moment you don't necessarily feel that you're taking anything from it, especially when you sort of got this voice in your head that's telling you to do one thing, and then a therapy is almost opening you up to create your identity to who you are again. Obviously the eating disorder does take over, and then that becomes your new identity. And having, like you say, creating a life outside of the eating disorder is another angle that is so important to do alongside the talking. And the talking gives you a voice, obviously. It gives you the voice as opposed to eating disorder. And I suppose, you've mentioned a lot there, it's a very complex journey starting that therapeutic intervention. If you could give any words of wisdom or advice to anyone who's struggling at the moment, who might not be ready to, do a certain aspect of that therapeutic intervention, what would you say to them?
It's hard to kind of give advice, because on the one hand, it's obviously easy to say I can give advice because I'm in recovery, and some people would say I've recovered. I like to say I'm in recovery still, but I think everyone's journey's different, so everyone's going to be slightly different in terms of how they reach the kind of point in their life where they don't need to have therapy. But I think if I was going to give any advice, I think it's very important to be selfish. Okay. It sounds really weird, but it will make sense if I'm speaking to someone who's probably got the situation as me. It's very hard to let yourself do something for yourself, and therapy's completely for yourself. You're getting better for yourself, only for yourself, so just keep doing that. I think it's also really important to remember that it's a disease, and it's a common disease. It's awful and complicated, but it's also just a really simple disease that people get. If you've got it, you have symptoms like anybody else. Yeah. And I think that's a nice thing to think about in terms of stopping you from thinking that it's wrong to say that you're special, but anorexia makes you feel isolated because it makes you think you've got something that makes you superior than everyone else, and it puts you above everyone else, and you don't want to get better. But if you look at it in the face and go, this is literally just a disease, then it allows you to accept that you're ill, and it allows you to accept that getting better involves treatment, and that there is something outside of anorexia, and it is something outside of it being a disease. And I think on top of all of that, I guess it's so hard to think advice-wise, but just remember that life can be really simple and really fun. And if you let it be really fun and really simple, obviously that's, I'm very lucky again. I have a very great support network, but if you just allow pleasures to be pleasures and not think they're a trick trying to trick you, or make that they make you greedy or they make you bad, you don't need to feel guilt for being happy or for doing something great. And I think that's really nice. And there was something, there was one thing that I wanted to say, and I think it's just this idea that even when you have recovered, in a sense, I'm out in the world trying to get a job. It's tricky, surprisingly. And I think you can think that you're recovered. It's very easy to think that anorexia is behind you. But I like to think of it as something that's like almost like a dormant or an inactive disease. So it's still in me, but it's just dormant, and so it can come back at any moment. And so I think in terms of, if I was going to give any advice on top of everything that I've just said, because I've rambled a bit, it would be just remember that every single day you have to make the choice to not be anorexic. It's not something that you can forget. You can never, it's a horrible thing to think, but you can never not be someone who's had anorexia, unfortunately. It's never something you can completely throw away and not think about. Every day I have to go, okay, I'm not anorexic today, and then tomorrow I'll wake up and I have to make that same decision, and I have to do that every single day. But what's so lovely about that is that no matter what I go on to achieve, and I hope it will be lots of really great things, and I hope I have loads of and so far it's, you know, since, you know, being in recovery, it's been an incredible kind of fun experience. But if I don't achieve anything, that's fine, because every day, if I get to the end of the day and I go, I wasn't anorexic that day, then I've achieved something so great and something so massive. And it's as simple as that. And I think that means that, you know, it can, and that feeling inside can just make you feel like you can do anything, which is really cool. And it's given me something that can propel me into any walk of life, because I know that whatever door I go through, which any door is open to me now, but whatever I do, wherever I go, if I just keep making that decision every single day, then life is just going to be really cool, which is great. And it's, you know, it's as simple, it can be as simple as that if you make that decision. But I think that's how I feel about it, really.
And that's the beauty of it. You've got a choice every day. Yes, it can be a bit, you know, if you're feeling a bit under the weather or you're feeling stressed, having that choice can be really difficult, and sometimes you prefer not to have the choice because you just want to be able to wake up and not have to make a choice. But the fact that you can actually be really liberating and empowering. And the fact that, you know, every day you make the decision not to be anorexic, you know, your life is so fulfilling, and as you continue on that journey, life only gets better.
Yeah, 100%. Just definitely.
I'm glad you're here today, Esme.
Thank you for having me.
For your time. Thank you.
If you have enjoyed this episode, please share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.